The war didn't begin with shouting, threats, or fines. It started with a single photograph, one innocent picture taken by a stranger passing through Maple Lane. In the early blush of morning, the sun hit the homeowner's garden at the perfect angle, turning the tulips into liquid gold and the marigolds into tiny burning suns. The stranger snapped a photo, posted it online, and unknowingly lit the first spark of chaos. Within hours, hundreds of people liked the picture. Dozens of locals commented. Cars slowed down outside the house. Morning joggers stopped mid-stride to stare. Even commuters rolled down their windows just to breathe in the sudden burst of color on an otherwise lifeless street. But not everyone celebrated. Across the road, standing rigid and offended behind her overly trimmed hedge, Karen watched the scene unfold with growing fury. She'd always believed Maple Lane should remain clean, controlled, and uniform. She had built her identity around enforcing an invisible rulebook, one where beige lawns and dull flower beds were the only acceptable decorations, and now, this explosion of color, this joy, this life, felt like a direct attack on the bland order she had spent years building. The garden only grew more vibrant with each passing day. Rows of tulips curved like brushstrokes across the yard. Morning glories spilled from trellises like waterfalls, and tall sunflowers rose defiantly toward the sky. The homeowner hadn't planned a masterpiece. They had simply planted beauty. But beauty has a way of attracting attention, and attention has a way of attracting trouble. Karen's trouble. She began her campaign immediately. She stood outside early in the mornings, pretending to walk her small, trembling dog, but really aiming her phone at the garden, taking close-up photos as though documenting evidence of some terrible crime. She muttered under her breath, loudly enough for neighbors to hear words like atrocity, nuisance, and visual pollution. The streets soon learned the truth. Karen hated the garden. Not because it broke any rule, but because it broke her rule. The unspoken law that everything must be dull enough not to offend her delicate sense of authority. The first official complaint arrived taped to the homeowner's door. A bold, stamped notice from the HOA, citing a list of vague accusations: excessive color, aesthetic disruption, possible distraction to drivers. It demanded that the garden be cleared within 10 days. The homeowner stood on the porch, reading the notice with a strange mix of disbelief and amusement. How could flowers, bright, harmless flowers, cause so much outrage? Yet behind the amusement lingered a tightening sense of frustration. They had worked for months to bring life to this yard. They had poured time, passion, and hope into every seed. And now someone wanted it all gone. But backing down had never been part of the homeowner's character. If anything, Karen's hostility strengthened their resolve. They watered the flowers more often, added fresh mulch, rearranged flower beds to make new patterns. They planted more seeds, bluer blues, brighter reds, deeper purples. The garden didn't shrink, it grew. This enraged Karen further. Soon she wasn't just taking photos. She was measuring flower heights with a plastic ruler, as if 1 inch too tall could justify her anger. She filed daily reports to the HOA, demanding emergency meetings. She staged community inspections with 2 other residents she had manipulated into believing that bright colors were a threat to property values. But most neighbors were fed up with her antics. Quietly, they began visiting the homeowner at dusk, leaving supportive notes or small pots containing seeds of their own. Children drew pictures of the colorful garden and taped them to their fridges. Elderly residents said walking past the yard felt like revisiting memories of places they thought they'd never see again. Karen was losing control, and she knew it. The HOA hearing was supposed to be her victory. She arrived with a binder stuffed so full of printed photos that the metal rings strained to hold them. She sat in the front row, arms crossed, foot tapping, jaw clenched, waiting for the moment she would finally force her will on the neighborhood. But then came the surprise she never anticipated. The room filled, completely, with neighbors. Not one had come to support Karen. Every seat was taken by someone who admired the garden. They spoke about the joy it brought them, the beauty it added, the peace they felt when passing by the vibrant blooms. For the first time in a long time, Karen was alone. Her arguments sounded desperate, exaggerated, petty. She claimed the garden was a safety hazard, that bright colors could blind drivers, that butterflies gathering in the yard could swarm people unexpectedly. Even the HOA board, typically strict and stubborn, struggled to keep a straight face. By the end of the meeting, the decision was crystal clear. The garden broke no rules. The complaint was dismissed. Karen had lost. But if the homeowner expected relief, they miscalculated. Because the look Karen wore as she stormed out of the room wasn't defeat. It was warning that a storm was building behind her eyes, a storm that promised retaliation. Later that night, while the homeowner watered the flowers under the glow of a quiet sunset, they felt it, a shift in the air, a tension that didn't belong in the peaceful hum of nature. Across the street, Karen stood motionless on her porch, staring at the garden with eyes full of calculation. She wasn't finished. She was planning something, and the homeowner could sense that whatever came next would be bigger, louder, and far more chaotic. They didn't yet know that this garden, this innocent patch of color, was about to become something extraordinary, something far beyond a neighborhood decoration, something that would draw crowds, cameras, and attention from far outside Maple Lane. It would transform into a symbol, a spectacle, a phenomenon. And it would all begin with Karen's next move. The days following the HOA hearing felt strangely quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't bring peace, but pressure. The homeowner sensed it immediately. Karen had not accepted defeat. She had merely retreated, licking her wounds, gathering fuel for whatever war she planned next. And it came sooner than expected. One morning, the homeowner stepped outside to water the roses and found something new. Deep, ugly footprints pressed into the soil near the tulip beds. The flowers had been kicked, their soft stems crushed, their petals torn and scattered like confetti after a storm. A miniature section of the garden, the one children loved most, had been deliberately destroyed. The sight hit hard, not because of the physical damage, but because of what it meant. Someone had crossed a line. The neighbors gathered quietly, each one looking at the trampled flowers with sadness and anger. Though no one said it aloud, everyone knew who had done it. Only one person in Maple Lane had both the motive and the spite to attack a garden under cover of darkness. Karen didn't just want the flowers gone. She wanted their existence erased. But instead of shrinking in fear or frustration, the homeowner felt something ignite inside, a determination stronger than anger, a resolve sharper than revenge, a thought that whispered, if she wants a fight, she will get one, but not the kind she expects. That night, the homeowner crafted a plan not fueled by destruction, but creation. They stayed up until dawn sketching designs, planning new layouts, studying color coordination, drafting ideas that went far beyond a simple neighborhood garden. It wasn't enough anymore for the flowers to bloom. They needed to mean something. They needed to stand for something bigger than a neighbor's irritation. The next morning, trucks arrived. Not small gardening vans, but large vehicles carrying supplies, lumber, lights, tools, and more plants than the garden could currently hold. Workers stepped out, confused but excited to transform the yard into something new. And with the homeowner's guidance, the transformation began. Raised flower beds were built, arches were installed, walkways were carved, and new lighting was placed strategically to make the colors glow even at night. Karen, witnessing the changes, nearly combusted. She stood on her porch every hour of the day, filming the workers, screaming into her phone, pacing back and forth like an animal trapped behind the bars of her own anger. But this time, her complaints found no sympathetic ears. The HOA had already ruled in the homeowner's favor. The neighbors didn't want more drama. No one was willing to indulge her rage any longer. Her control was slipping through her fingers like sand. But the homeowner wasn't just expanding the garden. They were preparing it for the world. Pictures of the newly improved yard began spreading online. The earlier viral photo had brought hundreds of likes. But now, the updated progress images exploded into thousands. People from nearby towns noticed. Local photography groups shared the posts. Community pages argued whether the street was about to become a tourist destination, and they were right. Because the homeowner wasn't creating a garden anymore. They were creating a landmark. By the end of the week, the yard looked like a living painting, intricate pathways lined with glowing lanterns, arches wrapped in morning glories, and flowers arranged with such precision that each section looked like a stroke on a giant canvas. The transformation was breathtaking, and that's when the unexpected happened. The first visitors arrived. Not neighbors, not locals, but strangers from other neighborhoods who had seen the photos online. They parked their cars on the street, stepped out with cameras, and admired the garden with awe. Some brought children, some brought pets, some brought sketchbooks or paint supplies. Others simply stood there, breathing in the vibrant colors like they were medicine. The homeowner welcomed them quietly, offering small pamphlets explaining each flower type and letting visitors take pictures freely. What had been a personal passion project had suddenly become a communal sanctuary. Karen, however, saw it only as an invasion. The sight of cars lining the street drove her into panic. She stormed across her lawn, arms flailing, shouting accusations about trespassing, traffic, noise, unauthorized tourism, and property value damage. But no one paid attention. Most visitors didn't even know who she was. They only knew the garden, and the angrier she grew, the more people came. Each tantrum became a spectacle. Someone captured her shouting and posted the video online. Within hours, her furious reactions began trending, drawing even more people who wanted to see the garden and the infamous Karen up close. The street erupted into a bizarre mix of beauty and chaos. Colorful flowers on one side and a raging neighbor on the other. Visitors caught in between, filming everything. The homeowner didn't expect any of this. But once the momentum started, there was no slowing it down. The garden became a local phenomenon, then a regional one, then something bigger. Soon, local news channels arrived, filming segments about the most colorful garden in the county. Reporters interviewed neighbors about how the once dull street had come to life. Drone footage captured the sweeping landscape of flowers, pathways, and glowing arches. Karen was nowhere to be seen during the interviews. She had locked herself inside her house, blinds drawn, seething with humiliation. But humiliation rarely stops people like her. It fuels them. Late one night, long after the visitors had left and the homeowner was inside resting, Karen made her move. She slipped outside with a flashlight, clutching a pair of garden shears and a bottle of weed killer. Her mission was clear. If the HOA wouldn't remove the garden, she would. Step by step, she approached the flower beds, her heart racing with rage and victory. She knelt beside the tulips, the very ones she had once trampled, and raised the shears. But something unexpected happened at that exact moment. A car turned onto the street. Not just any car, a police cruiser. Karen froze, crouched in the homeowner's yard, tools in hand, caught in the act like a burglar. The cruiser slowed down. Its lights flickered, and the homeowner, awakened by the sound, opened the front door to witness the scene. The moment hung in the air, suspended, electric, ready to explode, and everything in Karen's life was about to change. Melissa thought the storm was over. She believed the HOA had finally accepted defeat after the inspector's public exposure and the sudden drop in harassment. But what she didn't realize was that the HOA wasn't retreating. They were preparing for their final strike. The hostility began subtly. A broken sprinkler head on her lawn. A mysteriously delivered violation letter claiming she had excessively reflective house numbers. A complaint about overly enthusiastic seasonal decor. Even though she hadn't put up anything yet, the attacks were quieter now but more surgical, calculated, personal. Every minor irritation stacked into a slow-burning pressure cooker. The neighborhood felt colder, the sidewalks emptier, the smiles faker. A tension hung in the air that never fully dissolved. Even the streetlights seemed dimmer, as if the entire suburb was holding its breath. The HOA president, Marjorie, vanished from public view, but her influence lingered like a shadow. Rumors swirled. Secret meetings, angry emails, board members arguing behind closed doors. Melissa didn't care about gossip. She cared about one thing, her freedom to live without fear. But that freedom still felt fragile. Her home became both a refuge and a battleground. She installed cameras, upgraded locks, and kept every piece of HOA correspondence documented. She checked her security feeds more often than her messages. Every night felt like the calm before something inevitable, and then it came. The HOA board called for an emergency review meeting regarding Melissa's property. She didn't intend to go, but then she saw the agenda. One line, one accusation, recommendation, forced community compliance action. It was a declaration of war. When Melissa entered the HOA clubhouse that night, the atmosphere snapped tight. Dozens of homeowners filled the chairs, whispering, watching, anticipating. The board sat at the front like a tribunal, and at the center of the table, returned from hiding, was Marjorie, smiling like she had already won. Marjorie opened the meeting with a practiced sweetness. She listed infractions, fabricated issues, and exaggerated complaints. She spoke as though she were reading a guilty verdict. The room watched Melissa, waiting to see if she would break. She didn't. Instead, she stood, calm and steady, and placed a thick binder on the table. Every page documented the HOA's actions: harassment, fraud, retaliation. And behind her, homeowners began to rise. The ones who were fined unfairly, the ones who had been intimidated, the ones who were afraid to fight back until Melissa fought first. One by one, they stepped forward with their own evidence. The room flipped. Accusations reversed direction. The board's confidence cracked. Marjorie tried to maintain control, raising her voice, slamming her gavel, shouting over the crowd, but it was too late. The weight of every secret, every lie, every abuse collapsed on her at once. A homeowner produced a folder of emails showing the board had hidden violations on their own homes while aggressively targeting others. Another revealed that Marjorie had misused HOA funds for personal expenses. Someone played an audio recording, Marjorie threatening to make an example of Melissa. The room erupted. Voices surged. Papers waved through the air. The carefully curated facade of suburban order shattered into chaos. The board panicked, arguing among themselves, blaming each other. Marjorie screamed for silence, but her authority dissolved. It was the climax the neighborhood had unknowingly been building toward for years. By the end of the night, the homeowners voted, the board was dissolved, Marjorie was removed permanently, and a full legal audit was launched as Melissa walked out of the clubhouse. Finally free, finally vindicated. The homeowners clapped her on the back, thanking her, praising her, calling her the reason everything changed. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt relieved, lighter, like she had finally breathed after holding her lungs tight for too long. For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt real again, human, honest, and as Melissa stepped into the cool night air, hearing the echo of the vote behind her, she realized something. She hadn't just survived the HOA, she had broken its empire.